Mr. Chairman was very thorough in his discussion here. Let me just follow up on a couple things. You know, my concern is that we're trying to regulate something that back in 2000 EPA found that there was no problem for. It said we reached a decision that it's not warranted to regulate. And as a result, there was no risk to human health or the environment. There was no documented cases of damage to human health or the environment that have been identified. Now we are looking at doing that. And what's changed?
Let me just be clear. Our 2000 regulatory determination did propose regulation under Subtitle D as a solid waste. Since that time, we have gathered new information. We have damage cases that are part and parcel and discussed in the rule, and we can provide for the record, that talk about not only the catastrophic failure that happened at Kingston.
Well, wait. That's an impoundment problem. That's not a problem with the product itself.
No, and I was going to continue on.
Okay.
Thank you. But Kingston was the catastrophic failure due to the stability of the dam. But we also have damage cases that talk about arsenic and mercury and selenium migration to groundwater and to surface water that potentially affect drinking water sources. And all those damage cases are identified in the rule itself. So in 2000, we did not have that information. We continued to gather that information between 2000 and now. Kingston also happened. So we've looked at all the additional information that we have to support either a D or a C option. But in May 2000, we did determine that it was regulation under D was appropriate as a solid waste.
Okay, so basically you're saying that the problem is impoundment. It's not the product itself. Because, look, if you have we had a situation in my home state where we had a large water reservoir on top of a mountain, and the reservoir broke, all the water ran down the mountain, flooded a stream, you know, it was a massive flood, washed out everything along the way. That's a catastrophic event as well. That was due to the water. And you can have this with anything. You can put salt into an impound area and have a dam break and go down the stream. That will just destroy the area as well. I think it's an impoundment problem here rather than a problem that you haven't told me yet where the problem is with the product.
Yeah. The problem with the product, and again, the damage cases that we have that we can submit for the record, talk about leaching of the contaminants that are in the
okay, we're leaching though from the impoundment area. We're not
that are unlined, that are
okay.
not lined, that do not have, many of them do not have liners, some of them do, that are not lined, that we have damage cases that show that those contaminants, arsenic, mercury, selenium, leach into the groundwater from these unlined units.
Okay, so but again, it's an impoundment problem.
It's an impoundment in landfill, and what we're proposing in the C or D proposal is to regulate the impoundments or landfills that in many cases are unlined.
Okay, so what we've identified then is that it really is an impoundment problem that we're trying to work with here. We need to find a way to make sure that we contain what's there. The product as it's used now and all the other uses, you've not found a problem with that.
Right. What we are regulating is the disposal and management from the impoundments and landfills themselves.
Okay.
Which has resulted in catastrophic failures in some instances, in migration of contaminants to groundwater and surface water. So that's what we're proposing to regulate under the D or C, not the safe and environmentally sound beneficial use of coal combustion residuals.
Okay, so what we need to focus on here is how do we dispose of it once it's setting in an impound area. That correct?
Yes, once it's in the impound area, it's considered disposal. In the impoundment or the landfill itself, that is disposed coal combustion residuals.
At this point, you haven't found a problem with its use in concrete or other uses of the ash itself?
No, not at this point. In fact, you know, what we call encapsulated uses, and we again talk about this in the rule, those products are exempt from this rulemaking effort. We are not proposing to regulate those under C or D. And we believe that fly ash and concrete, wallboard, et cetera, those are all considered capsulated uses and should continue, and the administration and the Administrator Jackson supports the continued beneficial reuse of those products, and they would not be regulated under either the C or D option.
Okay, well, I think that's a key point of the hearing here as well, because I think we want to make sure that we don't describe this as a hazardous material, that has been found and used for over 50 years. And in my testimony here, we had some example back in 1953, and we haven't had any negative impact from the usage of the material at this point. And there are other uses being developed as we speak, so that as long as it's used, the product is encapsulated, as you say, we don't have the problem. The problem is with the impoundment of it and how it's stored, and therefore it can, if it's not stored correctly, be a problem. That's where we need to focus. Is that, can you adjust your testimony there?
Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
Okay, one of the things that is concerning to me also was during your determination of the costs of it, you know, by looking at the impact of what your rules may do to the costs, you know, say that the costs incurred by electricity generators would succeed in passing on all those costs to other customers, and therefore its impact would be insignificant. That to me is a very laissez-faire approach to what is you know, obviously a huge impact to the customers. It's just another way of putting a cost burden on the individuals and businesses who utilize, and everybody does, electricity. So I'm a little, I guess, frustrated by the fact that the cost was looked at and just say, well, because it can be passed on, it's not going to be significant. I'm a little miffed at how they could come up with that as not being significant. Microphone? Just leave it on.
In terms of cost and the benefits, we did do in our regulatory impact analysis for the proposed rule, we factored in that the national electricity prices averaged 8.84 cents per kilowatt hour. Assuming that 100% of the cost of the proposed rule would be passed on to the electric consumers, the regulatory impact analysis estimated that the average nationwide increase would be approximately 0.8%, with local markets increasing anywhere from 0 to 6%, and we can provide more information. But that was assuming that 100% would be passed on to the customers, and we, you know, that was the analysis that we had, and we can provide more information.
So you're going to raise somebody's electric bill 6%?
Excuse me?
Is that what you just said?
No, we did the analysis. That's the analysis. You know, again, we have not made a decision on either C or D. In terms of the proposal, we're still evaluating all options.
But you said it's going to raise the individual 6%?
Well, we're required as part of the rulemaking to do a regulatory impact analysis on the cost, and that was part of our analysis that we looked on.
And you don't think
I'm not making a statement that we are raising the consumer rates by 6%. That was the bounding case of our analysis.
But you don't think that's significant?
I'm not prepared to say whether it's significant or insignificant. That was the bounding cost of our analysis.
We have a lot of customers
right
in here, I'm sure, that think that'd be pretty significant, raise it 6%.
I appreciate that.
I think there'd be a lot of business folks. We were on a small business committee. Small businesses, if they had their utility bills raised 6%, that'd be pretty significant. I've got a foundry in my district that if it raised 6%, they're out of business, quite frankly.
Again, we have not made a decision on the C or D, and that was the bounding scenario that we looked at and are required to look at in our regulatory impact analysis. But we welcome any comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll stop right there.